So you may wonder if I had bad news, but I don't, so... Hello everyone and welcome to the Plants But Better channel. I'm Adina and today we're talking about this beautiful Sansevieria Starfish. That pretty much looks like a star, so yeah, that's the name right there. This plant is very similar with Sansevieria cylindrica. I mean, they grow the same, they pretty much require the same things, and if you saw the video about the cylindrica, this pretty much will repeat itself, so maybe you should watch another care video from our channel. For the care meter we have on our website, I would say this plant is pretty much a 9 out of 10. It is very reliable, it doesn't need constant care, so it's very friendly for beginners. And if you're into these types of plants, if you like Sansevierias, you can pretty much get this one because it will not disappoint. Okay, but enough with the chit chat, let's talk about light. And the cases for most Sansevierias is that they can tolerate medium light. However, I would pretty much recommend bright indirect light. The better the light, the better the growing, because with this type of plant, the growth rate is not, let's just say, it's not ideal. I would say that for this to get to a mature state, it will have to get the best amount of light. You can place it into partial shade as well. It can tolerate medium light. It will grow way slower and you will not see any difference if the light is not ideal. But other than that, I don't think I have much to say. Please don't keep it in dark corners. It's a myth that these types of plants are actually great in low light. They will slowly die. I mean, any plant, it doesn't matter the type, it doesn't matter the family, any plant will die in low light. Some of them faster than others. And this one will show signs pretty late because it's very resilient in that regard. But yeah, I would not keep it in low light. Please give it at least a grow light or something if you want this plant and your house is dark. Moving on to water. So I water this plant once every 2 weeks during summertime and once a month, maybe even more, during winter. Sansevierias in general don't like a lot of water. So yeah, you can try the schedule. If the schedule is not good enough for you, you can adjust it. Because my house is a bit colder than other homes, you can check the soil before you water it and make sure it's completely dry. Not just an inch, a couple of centimeters. It's just completely dry. Actually, if you had the curiosity to search for any like legitimate grower, you would see that some of them recommend watering it maybe once every 2 months during winter time. So it's not a tragedy if you forget to water this plant once in a while. Yeah, moving on to temperature. Sansevieria Starfish does well in average temperature. So that would mean something between 20 to 26 degrees Celsius, maybe even more. But please make sure you don't keep it under 15 degrees Celsius for a long period of time. That would cause damage on the roots. That would lead to root rot way easier. That would cause damage on the foliage as well. Even though this is such a steady plant, this is such a thick bastard, is still sensitive to cold, so I would not recommend leaving it in cold drafts and leaving it in cold, period. But what about humidity? Well, Sansevierias in general don't need a lot of humidity. Maybe something around 40 to 60% is great. I wouldn't go higher than that because the chances of fungal infections are quite high. If the humidity is too high, yeah, the chances go high if the humidity is high. But anyway, this plant doesn't require special humidity conditions. So your home humidity is good enough. What about fertilizer? How often should you feed your plant? And the case with this plant is that you can feed it once a month during growing season, and usually in the winter you should stop because, you know, winter is associated with dormancy and all that jazz. Plants don't grow, plants don't need feeding. However, if you see your plant growing, by the way, this plant right here, so this is the main plant. I don't know if you can see it, the one with the bigger leaves. And then you have the offsets, like a ton of offsets. So the main plant didn't grow bigger, like not visibly bigger, but it got quite a lot of offsets. I mean, I have 3 offsets right here. So my plant is still growing during winter. I'm filming this in December, so I could still feed this plant. However, I would advise you to use a more diluted solution and a bit less often, to fertilize less often, maybe once every 2 months. That is great. If you go into the extremes, like if you over-fertilize, I would say there are big chances for you to damage the roots. And you will not notice that right away. So over-fertilizing on this plant is harder to spot than in golden potass, for example. But moving on to NPK ratio, I use an NPK of 10-10-10. It's really balanced. I used several NPK ratios in the past as well, like maybe something more richer in nitrogen. If you know your plant is lacking roots, you can try to help it with an NPK that is higher in phosphorus, maybe something like 10-20-10 or some ratio that is similar to that. And yeah, other than that, you're good to go with almost any fertilizer you have at home. I mean, you should not worry about the NPK ratio that much. Moving on to substrate, the house of all roots. And I would say for this plant, the lighter the substrate, the better. Because Sansevierias don't like water, don't like that soggy soil. So for my plant right here, I use some cacti soil with some perlite and some coco coir. And I think, yeah, there are some pine barks in here, like very little pine barks. There is something chunky in here, like not too much, but there is some, because winters in my country are quite harsh, and if you watched any of my videos, you know I'm terrified of root rot, and that's why. But pine barks are not 100% necessary, so if you have at least perlite to add to your mix, that's great. For this one, I have just regular cacti soil and some perlite, so it's fine. As you can see, it's growing a lot of offsets. Please don't use just regular potting soil because that's too heavy on the roots, like in general, not only for Sansevierias. And don't use just peat moss, because peat moss for this plant is not quite great on the pH levels. It's just too acidic. Yeah, let's move on to plastic versus terracotta. And yeah, I have my plants in plastic, but I did have some of them in terracotta as well, and they did great. I mean, it's just up to you. Like if you like plastic more, get those babies in plastic. If you choose terracotta, please check the soil a bit more often. Then again, I will repeat myself like in every internet video I have up there. If you choose terracotta, check the soil a bit more often, because terracotta is porous and it helps water evaporate faster. And you might need to adjust that watering schedule a bit. What about repotting? Because now you know the substrate, now you know the medium pot, and you might want to know when to repot this plant. Okay, so this plant needs repotting when it's extremely necessary. Leave your plant to grow. Until you see a lot of roots coming out of the drainage holes, leave your plant alone. Like if you try to repot your Sansevieria Starfish too often, or any other Sansevieria, you will damage the roots, and you want to be avoiding that. Moving on to propagation. Best way to propagate your plant is by division. You just wait for new offsets to grow, and then wait a bit more to see them stable enough, and then separate them from the mother plant and put them directly into another pot. And then you have new plants. I would not propagate this by leaf cuttings. This is going to take forever, so I would not recommend that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Moving on to pests. And this plant rarely gets any pests, so that's the good news. So you may wonder if I had bad news, but I don't, so check the plant every time you water it. This is the best way to prevent any illness, any pests, any disease, any problems. Maybe if you have a problem with a parasite, that could be scale or maybe mealybugs. I think those can be problematic at some point. But we will have a different video and we will tell you everything there is to know about those kind of pests and how to prevent them, how to treat them, everything. Meanwhile, let's talk about toxicity. And unfortunately, this plant is not pet friendly. Keep it away from any pets, from any cats, dogs, hamsters or whatever. Please be aware of this. And yeah, we covered pretty much everything there is to know for a beginner care guide. If you have any questions that I didn't cover in this video, you can leave them in the comments. If you like this video, you can subscribe, you can leave it a thumbs up. You know the drill. And until next time, don't forget to take care of yourself and your plants. Bye.